So the moment you try to scale large language models, to handle context lengths measured in hundreds of thousands or even millions of tokens,
The entire system just grinds to a halt.
it really does. And this persistent computational roadblock, it's really the definition of the modern LLM scaling challenge.
It is more than just a bottleneck. It's a hard architectural limit. The standard attention mechanism, which is the core engine of the transformer, it hits a wall.
A wall defined by quadratic time complexity.
Right. And that's the single biggest thing holding back throughput, practical context length scaling, and, crucially, building true agentic intelligence. You need to be able to process these long trajectories in real time.
Well, that's exactly what we're here to talk about. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the technical report on Kimi Linear. It's a new hybrid linear attention architecture from the Kimi team.
And it's a remarkable piece of work.
It really is, because it seems to challenge a long-standing assumption in AI development, which is that you always have to sacrifice quality for efficiency.
And that is the central and, frankly, pretty provocative claim here. For years, linear attention models were seen as the efficient but ultimately less expressive cousin of full attention.
The faster but dumber option.
In a way, yes. But Kimi Linear, this is the first hybrid linear attention architecture that demonstrably outperforms full attention, specifically multi-head latent attention, or MLA.
And not just in one cherry-picked scenario.
No, this is under fair comparisons across short context, long context, and even reinforcement learning scaling regimes. It really suggests that the old efficiency versus quality trade-off might finally be, well, obsolete.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really understand the engineering choices that let them achieve this quality leap while at the same time unlocking these just stunning efficiency gains.
We are looking at an architecture that reduces key value, or KV, cache usage by up to 75%.
And gets over 6 times faster decoding throughput at 1 million tokens of context. That's not a small improvement. That's a profound shift in the economics of running these large models.
And to appreciate the breakthrough, I think we have to first really internalize the problem with standard softmax attention. It has quadratic time complexity.
So for anyone who needs a quick refresher, quadratic means if you double the length of your input, say from 50,000 to 100,000 words.
The computational cost doesn't just double, it quadruples. It hits an exponential limit, and it hits it very quickly.
And while that's limiting the speed, you also have the memory constraint from the KV cache, which grows linearly with the sequence length and just chews up all your GPU memory.
So you have this dual problem of a speed limitation and a memory limitation. And the historical attempts to solve this with purely linear attention models, they always failed on quality.
They just weren't expressive enough.
Not at all, even in relatively short sequences. They were fast, but they simply couldn't learn the complex relationships that you need for sophisticated tasks.
So the key had to be retaining that expressivity while somehow getting to linear scaling. Where did the groundwork for finally closing that quality gap come from?
The gap really started to narrow recently thanks to 2 key breakthroughs that the Kimi team leveraged heavily. The first was the introduction of effective gating or decay mechanisms.
To stop the memory from getting overloaded.
Right. And the second was the application of the delta rule, which you see in precursors like DeltaNet and Gated DeltaNet, or GDN. These mechanisms started to manage that challenge of unbounded accumulated state, which leads to memory interference.
They sort of act like a filter, deciding what information to keep and what to gently discard as the context grows longer and longer.
That's a good way to think about it. And Kimi Linear builds directly on this foundation. But instead of just being a research curiosity, it's engineered as a drop-in replacement for full attention. It's a hybrid architecture designed for the extreme efficiency demands of agentic intelligence.
Without sacrificing that quality.
Without sacrificing the quality.
Okay, so let's dive into the core engine that makes this possible.
Yeah.
The specific linear attention module they developed, which they call Kimi Delta Attention, or KDA.
Right. This is the mechanism that's responsible for both the high expressivity and the hardware efficiency.
And it's a refinement of that Gated DeltaNet, or GDN, architecture you mentioned.
A significant refinement. The fundamental difference is in how KDA manages the forgetting mechanism. GDN used a pretty coarse scalar headwise forget gate.
So like having one single on-off switch for an entire block of information.
That's a good analogy. And KDA tightens that up considerably. It introduces a much finer-grained channel-wise gating mechanism through a diagonalized gate, diagate.
So instead of one switch for the whole head.
You have individual precise volume dials for every single feature dimension within that head. And this level of fine-grained control is absolutely critical for regulating the finite-state RNN memory and preventing interference over these vast sequence lengths.
So it's all about regulatory precision. How does this connect back to the classical delta rule we touched on earlier?
It connects through the concept of associative memory. KDA's recurrence is rooted in the classical delta rule, which you can think of as applying online gradient descent on a reconstruction objective.
Okay, can you break that down a bit?
Think of it like a student constantly taking notes. Every time they hear a new piece of information, their brain doesn't just add it to the end of the page. It instantly adjusts and corrects the existing memory state, optimizing it to best represent everything that came before, plus the new input.
So the state is a learnable memory that's perpetually correcting itself.
That's the idea. It makes it far more expressive.
That does make it clearer. Now, let's talk pure speed. The massive hardware efficiency jump. Where does that come from in the KDA module? It has something to do with the diagonal plus low rank or DPLR formulation?
This is where the engineering is really brilliant. KDA uses a specialized constrained variant of DPLR transition matrices. The standard DPLR formulation involves several auxiliary variables and matrix multiplications.
And the Kimi team found a major optimization there.
They did. They realized they could bind both the auxiliary variables A and B in the equation directly to the key, K.
So binding them to the key, what does that actually do in hardware terms? What's the computational impact?
Well, it allows the system to massively simplify the computational graph. Instead of running 3 separate calculation steps, which is inherent in the general DPLR formulation, they essentially fold those steps into one primary calculation bound to the key.
And that simplification reduces computation.
It does, and critically, it also alleviates numerical precision issues, which allows for far better hardware utilization. This specialization is why KDA achieves nearly twice the speed of DPLR for kernel execution time, up to 64K input length.
So we've established KDA as this powerful, expressive, and incredibly efficient linear engine. But Kimi Linear isn't purely linear, it's a hybrid.
That's right.
So how did they stitch this linear engine together with traditional full attention layers to get the final model?
They adopted what's called an interlayer hybrid architecture. So they strategically interleave the high-efficiency KDA layers with periodic full attention layers, the MLA layers.
And that preserves what, a sparse path for global information?
It does. It keeps the path open for those truly global long-range connections that linear attention can sometimes struggle with on its own.
And they didn't just guess at the ratio. I saw they ran ablation studies to find the optimal balance.
They did. And they settled on a uniform 3.1 ratio, 3 KDA layers for every 1 full MLA layer. That configuration gave them the sweet spot, the best trade-off between quality and throughput.
It's just fascinating that they found such a precise measure.
It really is.
So here's what might be the most counterintuitive architectural choice they made. It's about the positional encoding strategy. Kimi Linear applies no position encoding or no PE to all the full attention layers.
Yes.
Why would you do that? Why strip positional awareness from what is the most globally capable layer in the model?
It's a deliberate choice, and it's rooted in delegation. By using no PE in the MLA layers, the entire responsibility for positional information and recency bias gets offloaded to the KDA layers.
So KDA becomes the primary position-aware operator in the whole architecture.
It does. The MLA layers are then free to purely calculate global affinities without having to worry about where a token sits in the sequence. They can just trust KDA to anchor all of that information.
And this delegation actually improves performance.
It results in improved robustness and extrapolation, particularly at very long ranges. The paper mentions this aligns with a trend of complementing global no-PE attention with a dedicated position-aware mechanism. It also really simplifies long context training, since you don't need to make complex adjustments to parameters like rope E when you stretch context limits.
That structural rigor really seems to be proven by the results. Let's look at the validation, because these weren't small experiments. They made sure it was a fair fight.
Oh, absolutely. The research team insisted on strict parity. So Kimi Linear, the full attention baseline MLA, and the precursor GDNH, all of them were pre-trained using the exact same recipe.
Which is a massive 1.4 trillion tokens.
A massive amount. And they all had the same structure, 48 billion total parameters, 3 billion active parameters. This makes the performance comparisons highly reliable.
And the results showed that Kimi Linear is superior, not just where you'd expect it in long contexts, but also in standard short context tasks.
And that, for me, is the landmark moment. In short context performance, at 4K, Kimi Linear achieved a 51.0 on the MLU Pro benchmark.
Which beat MLA pretty handily.
It did. MLA was at 47.2 and GD&H at 47.9.
Yeah.
That performance margin of nearly 4 points means Kimi Linear is starting the race with better baseline cognitive abilities than the model it's designed to replace.
And then when we look at the main target long context scaling, the gap gets even wider.
It does. On the ruler benchmark, tested at a huge 128K context length, Kimi Linear scored 84.3. That significantly outperformed the MLA baseline at 81.3 and GD&H at 80.5. It's Pareto optimal. It's just better and faster.
They also used some synthetic tasks to really isolate the core strength of the KDA engine itself, didn't they?
They did, to test its ability to recall specific buried information. KDA consistently got the highest accuracy on sequence length scaling tests for really demanding tasks like palindrome, which requires precise history retrieval across huge gaps and multi-query associative recall.
So that confirms that the fine-grained channel-wise decay mechanism we talked about isn't just theory. It actually delivers superior memory management in practice.
It really does.
Okay, let's revisit the inference numbers because this is the immediate practical benefit for anyone building with LLMs. The memory and speed advantages are enormous.
The memory savings are substantial. They're directly linked to the KDA layers maintaining a fixed size state, unlike the constantly growing KV cache of full attention. Kimi Linear reduces KV cache usage by up to 75%.
75%. And then when you get to the decoding stage,
The speed difference is dramatic. At 1 million tokens of context, Kimi Linear achieved a 6.3 times faster time per output token. It measured 1.84 milliseconds compared to MLA's 11.48 milliseconds.
a six-fold improvement in decoding time for a million token context that's game-changing. Even the initial processing time for the prompt, the pre-filling phase, sees big gains.
Yes, during pre-filling, Kimi Linear showed a 2.9 times efficiency advantage over MLA for those 1 million token sequences. The evidence is comprehensive. It's the top performer across every phase: pre-training, fine-tuning, long context evil, and even reinforcement learning convergence.
So to just quickly summarize the architecture's success.
Kimi Linear successfully overcomes the traditional quality limits of linear models by combining the highly expressive channel-wise gated delta attention, the KDA, with sparse global attention layers in that carefully tuned 3-to-1 ratio.
Right. And that brings up one last important question about deployment. If this is a hybrid architecture, combining two fundamentally different attention types, how can they claim it's a drop-in replacement? That sounds like a potential nightmare for compilers and infrastructure.
And that is the practical challenge they seem to have solved. The paper really emphasizes that Kimi Linear is designed to be fully compatible with existing full attention pipelines.
So despite the complexity under the hood,
They ensure it requires absolutely no modification to caching or scheduling interfaces.
so what you're telling me is that the computational cost and the memory usage are slashed, but the integration path for engineers stays smooth.
That's the goal. For organizations moving toward long context agentic applications, this isn't just a research finding, it's a pathway to scaling without having to fundamentally rebuild their entire inference stack or invest in prohibitively specialized hardware. It's an efficiency breakthrough that's designed for immediate practicality.
And that immediate practicality really is the key takeaway here. You've got superior quality paired with an architectural efficiency that finally breaks that quadratic complexity barrier, and it's all designed for seamless integration. That is a serious development for the future of LLMs.